So thank you all for coming. I'm Saul Hansel. You might recognize my name from the 20 years I spent at the New York Times, mostly writing about digital media and electronic commerce, and then I started the Bits blog, and then got it in my head I actually wanted to run companies instead of watch them, and so I went to AOL Huffington Post for a bit, and now I'm running a company that's building on-demand, over-the-top personalized newscasts called CTV. It's not launched yet, but we think you'll like it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, thankfully, not the future, not what's going to happen, in the interactive world at some other time. We're talking about right now because there's real money being made and real behavior happening in digital on-demand video. So the topic is, how do you distribute your programming online, and how's that changing, and how do you make money from it by selling ads or subscriptions or downloads, and how's that changing? And we have with us people who actually know what's going on that in lots of interesting ways. Betsy Morgan is down there as the president of The Blaze. That's Glenn Beck's company that has one of the most interesting over-the-top strategies, and now on MSOs as well, and also runs a website, theblaze.com. And before that, she ran the Huffington Post and CBSNews.com. Rich Greenfield of BTIG is probably the closest and best observer of the digital media world and the economics behind it. And Beth Clearfield has been doing this for a very long time, running the digital distribution and business development for BBC Worldwide Americas, which sells programs the BBC makes to all kinds of distribution channels, and she's got a great view of the very complicated world of video distribution. I'm passing on apologies from Jason Krebs, who is the head of ad sales for Maker Studios. He's been called to Los Angeles to meet with Disney, his new owners. So we will just talk about him behind his back. This is a small, intimate group, so just, we'll have time for questions like they do, but just speak up if you're curious about something. I want to start out just real quick, sort of indicator or one thing that you observe that is different this year than last year across this world. What are you seeing in your world that is changing fastest? Beth?
Changes this year. Well, I think if I could just expand that a little bit, changes in the past couple of years.
Sure.
We've seen a couple of interesting changes. One we were talking about the other day is the growth of digital distribution partners as a first window for programming, rather than having those partners basically be an echo window, a second window off of a linear broadcast network. That increasingly, as a producer of programming in the UK that we then distribute in all around the world, we're finding that we can work with digital partners first, whether or not we've had a linear window. And that's a major change. And I think another change is the rise of exclusivity as a requirement for some of those digital partners, that more and more the SVOD services are trying to distinguish themselves from each other by having exclusive, unique content that no one else has. That's been a big change in the past 2 years.
So if you're selling programs, the big change is there's a lot more serious, the digital distribution is much more important to you. You can potentially cut more interesting exclusive deals, and right. So
yeah.
There's a scale here. Rich, in the vast universe you look at, where do you see the biggest shift, either in business or consumer behavior?
Well, look, I think you have to look at the fact that video, when this whole panel is about online video or monetizing digital video. Digital video used to be stuck in this thing called the computer, then maybe the tablet and the computer. But digital video really is getting to the television, and I think that's an interesting, meaningful shift over the course of the last year. I mean, there were very few apps when you went to an Apple TV, and it's still a closed ecosystem, but there were very few apps. If you look at the devices that are coming out now and how that ecosystem looks like it's about to explode, I don't think we've hit that inflection point. I think we're getting close to an inflection. I mean, Chromecast still has limited apps, but it's growing by the day. My suspicion is the next version of Apple TV will have an open app store versus the closed app store, or they choose which apps go in. But I think you're going to get access to lots more content on these platforms than you've had before, and that's the biggest struggle has been getting to the place where people spend the most time watching video. People don't watch 5 hours of video on their phone. Rick Cordea from NBC gave a great slide that there certainly is demographically, especially depending on where you are. If you're trying to watch a sports match and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you're at work, you certainly will watch on your phone or you'll watch on your tablet or your PC. But when you're at home at night and you want to watch content, you want to watch on your TV. I mean, I think of last night I was watching The Americans via Fire TV using Amazon Prime. The point is as you start to get, whether it be YouTube content, whether it be just, internet video, as Betsy can talk to, like The Blaze, as that content gets easier to access on the screen that you like watching content, long-form content the most, I think that's a meaningful shift that we're starting to see that's going to influence the importance of being in this new world for a lot of the big media companies, which have so far stuck to their knitting of kind of most of their great content has only been distributed over traditional television.
Do you see data that says people are watching it? Clearly, Beth is seeing that the SVOD services are trying to, make noise, buying things exclusively. Sure. But is there data that is it we're building it now and hoping they will come later, or what do you actually see in terms of data about what consumers are doing?
Well, I mean, I think you have to look no further than Netflix.
Okay.
I mean, data just came out this morning. If you look at Sandvine data, Netflix is literally growing faster, despite the fact that Netflix is already in, now 35 million homes, despite the fact that Netflix was the #1 use during prime time last year of internet bandwidth, Netflix is growing faster than overall streaming bandwidth on the internet. So, I mean, despite its size, it's growing faster, which I think shows you people really love to stream video, especially to big screens when it's a great experience and when it's easy. I just saw a statistic the other day at one of the upfronts. I think it was at the Fox upfront where they showed a statistic showing they had how do people watch, and they showed it was like basically each of the programs was laid out, and it showed how much of the percentage was coming from live or DVR, how much was coming from video on demand, and by video on demand I mean from the cable set-top box or the satellite set-top box, then Hulu, and then Fox on Demand, which is their own website. The percentage of Hulu on almost every show dwarfed the VOD percentage because VOD is generally a bad experience, and I think as Beth was just talking to these SVOD services, these online SVOD services, a lot of them have great user-friendly interfaces that work really well across platforms. So I definitely think people are using them. I think the proof is time spent is growing significantly.
And
Rich, do you think?
You have to give your biggest change too.
I have to give my biggest change, but just thinking about what you just said, and then I'll give my biggest change. I'm thinking about Nielsen data that I saw in March, which still showed people consuming traditional television, over the air or through their cable box in large quantities versus mobile video streaming or versus tablet video streaming. I mean, I go back and forth with this, that sure. I feel like the sort of cable bundle, the linear way we watch television historically is still not, in 100 million households, still not ready to be broken.
Well, I think of it as right now we're leading from the extremes, and don't take that the wrong way, meaning Glenn is too extreme, but when I think about who has broken with tradition, meaning who is not using the traditional video bundle,
right.
Right now it's Glenn Beck at The Blaze and it's WWE for wrestling. Those are probably the two biggest examples of people that have broken off, and you've got YouTube channels, and clearly Disney bought Maker because they want to do Maker.tv, and you've got Tastemade, and Tastemade wants to do Tastemade.tv, and it's clearly moving in that direction. But I think right now, the question is, I think really, when do you see the mainstream content creators go, you know what, there's enough money to make, and this probably goes to the whole point of this panel, when is there enough money to make to leave the traditional ecosystem, because it's so easy to make tons of money.
Right, so a good example of that would be, something's changed in the marketplace when Mark Burnett announces he's going to do a Netflix deal.
or even when Mark Burnett just says, you know what, I don't even need Netflix, I'm just going to create my own great show, put an app on all of these devices, and keep 100% of the economics. And I'll use MLB, advanced media for the back end to power this unbelievable content experience, and forget about having intermediate. I don't need Netflix. Why do I need Netflix?
I don't need a network gatekeeper. I don't need a Netflix gatekeeper.
Right, and look, at the end of the day, Netflix is kind of moving in that direction too, right? They create more content. They're not becoming a third-party distribution network. They're becoming a content creator that's going direct to consumer. Right. Eventually, they have to evolve to that. I think the question is, you know, right now Netflix is willing to pay the content creators way more than anyone who just, you know, I am sure if anyone here went to the AOL upfronts or the Yahoo upfronts, there's no way anyone of the well-known talent on any of those shows that are being created, they're not getting paid anywhere near what Kevin Spacey's getting paid.
Exactly.
Like the dollars just aren't there. And I don't think there's that many people yet willing to bet on themselves the way Glenn did.
Right. So to Saul's point, so what do I see that's changed in the last year? You know, we were very early on when we launched in 2011. What was then GBTV is now the Blaze TV, our OTT 24/7 video streaming network. I think we're now seeing in 2014 other people trying to get into that business with sort of flagship personalities, right? John Klein, who is running a company called TAP, is starting to do it with some kind of mid-level personalities. Chernin Entertainment, run by Peter Chernin, is also, they were into actually CS yesterday, is also trying to do it in certain categories. So I think the rise of other OTT channels in different categories, we're going to see more and more of.
Yeah. So let's go. I want to dive into what Beth was talking about, which is very interesting because for this crowd, the video is different than a lot of other media because it's expensive to produce, and there's been in both movies and television a windowing strategy that puts the program in the highest value situation first, where it can make the most money, and then wanders it from, in a traditional sense, the network to HBO to VOD. There's a whole order of things, and I get a sense that we have more categories and different constraints. So, if you could get a sense about where the market equilibrium is, and what are the forces on you to take the next Sherlock or Downton Abbey or whatever it is that you make to get the most value for the quality and the money you spend. What's the order? And
it's really interesting because traditionally, like over the past 5 years, would be the tradition, program is on that the BBC produces. For instance, we either co-produce with an American broadcaster cable partner, or just license to such an entity. And then the next thing that would happen would be a day after broadcast transactional window on iTunes and Amazon and other EST services. And then some months later, we would have the ability to put that program into subscription VOD services. There's the
DVD as well.
Set-top box on the way. And then physical is in the middle. You're right. I'm very digitally focused.
No, I know.
But there is that physical window. That part hasn't really changed.
At least.
Yeah. And so that had been our pattern all along. Mm-hmm. About 3 or 4 years ago, we had a program called Misfits that Channel 4 made that we had the distribution rights for, and we couldn't find a linear home for it. It was just very strong, wonderful show, but very strong content, very sexy, lots of swearing, but a really excellent show for a youthful audience, and we couldn't find a linear network, so Hulu stepped in and became our first partner. Mm-hmm. So they took the premiere, the US premiere of the show, and then on the back of that, we were able to build all those other transactional window, DVD window, and eventually a linear broadcaster picked it up as well, having seen the popularity of the show on Hulu. So that became sort of a new paradigm for us, and we've done quite a number of shows like that. Now with Hulu, we have almost a dozen where we've gone straight to Hulu first, and they've now come in as a co-production partner on a program the BBC wanted to make called The Wrong Mans, which is another great show. I don't want to pitch my shows, but a really good comedy drama starring James Corden as one of the stars. And so they were able to help us enable production by bringing in financing and really acting as true partners. And that paradigm is spreading out to other SVOD partners as well. And we'll have shows premiering on other services. So it's a different way of, as a distributor of more programming than the linear networks can absorb in this country, it's a really great opportunity for us to bring programs here in a different way. that otherwise the public wouldn't get to see.
Do you see, at this point, clearly the Netflixes and the Hulus are buying programs, they're acting like cable networks essentially. Are they at a lower tier, more like an indie movie studio versus a main studio? So if you had something that was a mass appeal, they're going to be outbid by the big networks, or are they actually, financially, because of whatever situation they're in, able to be, at the same tier of opportunity for you?
It depends is the
Okay.
answer, because it depends on the quality of the program and the size of the budget for the program we want to make. But they are now rivaling at least smaller cable nets, in some cases larger cable nets, maybe even the networks.
Is this a better or worse world for you? If you look at, how the slices of the audience and the money comes in, do you have more? You have more slices. Does the pie get bigger, or is it just same or smaller but in different pie slices?
Right this second, this is a really great time for us because the BBC is the largest producer of English language content in the world, and we've never been able to distribute all of it. In this country, you've got a big funnel, and then you're going into sort of narrow network schedules trying to find a place for all those shows. So this is just an additional opportunity for us. Where it goes longer term, I'm not sure, because all these services are now competing with each other with linear broadcast, and whether they then start to winnow down. That can be the case.
There's only so many hours in a day. I mean, the one thing I know is I do have look, I can multitask, and I'm sure there's plenty of the people in the room right now multitasking. But there's only so many hours in a day to watch content. If I'm watching, content on Hulu, or my example before of Amazon Prime, and I'm generally doing that viewing during primetime hours, Monday through Sunday, it's coming from something.
Yeah,
And
arguably true. But from our perspective, if there's content that you would have loved to see, but there was no linear network willing to carry it, this is a different way for you to get access to it.
So to some degree, it's shifting from mass to a little more long tail. There's stuff that the BBC makes that has an audience but wasn't big enough to, or didn't have the standards and practices to hit even the very low standards and practices of U.S. cable and network TV right now. So, there's a shift from head to tail somewhat.
But you are right. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, right?
Look, and I don't worry. I think it's great for consumers to get access to more content. It's great for content creators. The challenge is that a lot of the content that I won't specifically say the BBC, but there's $65 billion of money that gets spent on TV advertising that is challenged as you spread eyeballs thinner, and especially on most of the platforms that you were talking about, a lot of them have very different or no ad loads.
Right.
And that's really challenging if you're thinking about all of this money that's being spent trying to get at that 30-second set of spots that run every night from,
Can you see that if you look at the set of media companies that make television programming, right, and you look at them, what is happening, the digital slice of their business starting to get meaningful. Everyone talks about their Hulu or their Netflix deals on the earnings calls now.
Sure.
So if
free money from heaven.
Right. If you look at for the media industry in 2014, is the increase in distribution a net increase in income or a decrease? What's happening to, program creators this year because of all of this?
Well, right now it's great.
It's great. Okay.
Right now you're getting extra money that you weren't getting before. The question is as I think about it as all cable networks. I mean, if you think about FX years ago, what did you used to watch on FX 10 years ago? You would watch Ally McBeal reruns, X-File reruns, and there's a third one that I'm forgetting. But there was like 3 reruns. That's all they ran like all day long. And now FX has some of the best original programming on television because everyone goes from selling other people or buying other people's old, I wouldn't say garbage, but other people's old stuff to other people's new stuff to financing their own new stuff to owning, creating, producing their own new stuff. And I think the fear is as all of these distribution platforms that right now are paying big dollars for old stuff or even financing newer catalog, newer content, when do they start becoming producers on their own nickel and no longer needing the BBC, no longer needing other people, and they're just literally content sites like The Blaze, and all of a sudden, there's less buyers in the marketplace, and advertising has gotten hurt, and that's the double-edged sword to this.
You fear that there's it's like the dot-com boom. There's a lot of activity. It's benefiting. Dollars are flowing in certain directions, and then it will all pop.
Look, when I see
and they're flying to different people.
Yeah.
And Saul, what's amazing, and here we sit amidst the broadcast network upfront. CBS gives its final upfront. I'm sure Rich will be there at 4 o'clock today, gives the final upfront of the week. There's still tremendous money being spent in television advertising. I mean, that's something that baffles my mind, that, given DVR capabilities, TiVo capabilities, the ability to get this content in so many other places without advertising, that there are 250 global advertisers that are still very, very focused on participating in the broadcast upfronts and spending money there.
But it probably doesn't represent anyone in this room, but there's still 50% of consumers that don't have a DVR, and they still get home at 5 o'clock at night and then watch 5 hours of television.
So just to stay on distribution for another second, talk about the path. So Glenn Beck walks out of the Fox News studio,
right,
sort of with a huge fan base, and sets up in a distribution model that damn near every one of his fans isn't familiar with, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm sure...
Or the Fox News fans certainly weren't familiar with.
Right. So many of your subscribers had not subscribed to a digital video service before. So talk about...
Well, and Saul, to sort of add to that challenge, we weren't allowed to say on Fox News that Glenn was I mean, he was allowed to say on his last day, good night, and I'm not coming back on Monday, but he wasn't allowed to say where he was going.
Like Howard did for a year.
Exactly, right.
Or
Howard
Oprah did for a year.
So Oprah could say, you'll see me on OM, and Howard could say, you'll see me on Sirius, and Glenn couldn't say anything. And as Saul said, we had an audience that, his Fox News audience, that was an older audience, an audience that probably didn't do a lot of commerce or content buying on the internet. And here we were going to start this new channel. And he left Fox News in May, and we started the channel in September. So we had the summer to sort of figure out how we were going to message to those people that you could still watch Glenn at 5 o'clock on a new network that we were creating, that we were the gatekeepers of, that was something we owned, called GBTV. And we did have one platform, and that was radio. Glenn still does his radio show 3 hours a day, a reach of 10, 12 million people a week, 400 radio stations throughout the country. So that kind of helped as a Barker channel. And gosh, he talked about that new network, GBTV, every single day for those 3 months. What was amazing to us, and I think it speaks to people will, if there's great content out there that resonates with people and they're interested in, they will find it. I mean, you can't make it so hidden and obscure that, it's impossible to find, but they will find it, and it doesn't require a tremendous amount of marketing effort. And people found Glenn in very, very, very high numbers. And we needed those high numbers when we launched in the fall of 2011, because we had to pay for this network, because Fox wasn't paying for this television show anymore. And they, not only was Glenn not getting a salary, I mean, we had nobody. We had no lighting guys, we had no stagehands, we had no producers, we had no edit equipment, we didn't have anything. And here we had this goal of making this program in September that looked as much, if not better than what Glenn did at Fox News. So having those early subscribers that trickled in over that summer.
You got several hundred thousand really fast, right?
We did. And again, I think, one, that's the power of Glenn's brand, and it was sort of a smart marketing message that we did primarily through radio at that time.
So if you were thinking about this question, you might be some major producer of digital content, or you start up with some idea. What are the pros and cons of doing your own brand of over-the-top TV that we've been talking about, rather than selling potentially to somebody who already has a big online audience like a Netflix or a YouTube or whatever?
So Saul, it's all about risk and reward, right? I mean, you're taking a big risk. You're not getting paid to make a pilot. You're not getting paid. Your talent isn't getting paid if you don't get subscriptions. There's high risk there. I mean, the reward is you're your own gatekeeper. You can put on whatever content that you want to put on. You don't have, Glenn doesn't have to sit around with his producers and the Fox News people the day after the show to say, you shouldn't have said that, or we want you to talk about this, or this would make for a better lead-in, or you've got to have this guest on. We are totally in control of our destiny, but you've got to be willing to take that risk to do that. I mean, I think I'll go back to Mark Burnett, and we'll see if he does a Netflix deal in the future or not. But go back to somebody like Mark Burnett, and it was really fascinating to watch him and his wife, Roma Downey, market their series for the History Channel last year, the Bible. So, it was a partnership with Hearst and the History Channel, and, they had sort of plotted it all out, and they had shot it in Morocco. It was a fantastic miniseries. They were very, very passionate about the project and getting as many eyeballs as they could to the History Channel. But History had a very conventional, here's how we're going to market this. And Mark and Roma took one look at how they were going to market that and said, that's not enough. That's not enough marketing. It's not enough. We want a Super Bowl ad, and we want this, and we want that. And History said, well, we got a lot of other programming we got to market. It's not up to you guys. Thank you. You made a great miniseries. And so what Mark and Roma did, it was absolutely extraordinary. For 6 months, they went out on the road, and they themselves marketed this miniseries in every place that they could, that they felt like every rural community, every church, every gathering spot they felt that had an audience that would be interested in the content.
I want to just stay with the Blaze for 1 second, because you're doing an interesting evolution, right? So now you're going back and taking it into more traditional distribution channels. And so just tell me about your dish deal,
Right,
and
so-
how you see the, going from over the top back under the bottom or whatever.
So after we launched the OTT channel, about a year later, Dish Networks came to us and said, "Hey, this stuff looks pretty good. You're doing programming in half-hour and hour segments. You're putting advertising in it. It looks to us like a cable channel, which
TV quality.
It's TV quality. It's in HD. It's well lit. The people on set have makeup on. Like, it looks like any other cable channel. Would you be interested in distributing through an MSO?" In the cable and sat space. And we said, that sounds really interesting, and we would definitely look at that. We don't want to give up our OT business. Dish said, that's okay. We'd like to be able to sell the Blaze a la carte, which they do. We've gotten on many other cable providers since then. And a lot of people kind of looked at us and said, you're going backwards, right? Like, you guys are OTT, the cable bundle's going to break, and why are you going backwards? And our idea was, look, it was fantastic distribution. I mean, if we can get in 100 million homes or 60 million homes or 40 million homes with a cable channel, and we can reach those people for now until that bundle breaks, and not give up our OTT business, which was continuing to grow on the side, why wouldn't you try that?
One of the things that is in play, we've talked about this a little bit, is the balance of revenue, if there is any, between subscription and advertising, and to some degree, sell-through pay-per-view DVD. The U.S. TV business, when I look at it, it's been pretty balanced in terms of the revenue between advertising and subscription revenue. It's about 50-50 for the industry as a whole, right?
Well, but it varies so widely,
Right.
right? Like ESPN and the sports networks take the vast majority of the subscription dollars,
Yep.
And advertising is left to everybody else. And so, when you actually do the math on it, it may look balanced, but it's actually very different than what it appears. I think that's an important thing to kind of keep in mind, that, the reality is that getting paid subscription fees for content, is not easy.
That at the same time, you were talking about the pleasures of watching TV without commercials, right? For
Sure.
A scripted drama or there's lots of things where you like it better if it doesn't have commercials.
Breaking Bad without commercials
Right.
is definitely better than Breaking Bad with commercials.
So people know that, but people don't want to spend money. We're in a world of sort of infinite combinations and choices,
Sure.
right? Are there any clues that are going to tell us how the mix is going to shift? Are we moving to an era where at least some people have the ability to pay for more things without commercials, and because of that, we're going to go more towards subscription? Or is the fact that everything's out for free going to take less out of,
You already do today, right? I mean, as long as you don't care about live and now, look, you can buy an antenna, stick it in most people's houses, apartments, and get free television with commercials.
Right.
And then basically, if you paid for Hulu, Netflix, and Amazon Prime, you end up with a tremendous amount of content. You just don't get today's content. You get, usually 9 months old, 12 months old content. And so,
And a broadband subscription.
sure, definitely need a broadband subscription. There's no doubt about it. But
Yeah.
and just in terms of the ability to avoid ads, if you want to avoid ads, you can see a tremendous amount of great content. It's just you have to wait. And look, I do think one of the interesting things is that content now is competing with all of this great content of the past. Like, it used to be that, you know, you had to go out and buy a DVD set, or you'd have to watch each episode every night, you know, that was syndicated on off-network syndication at 11 o'clock at night to put together a series. Now, for for $8 or $9 a month, you subscribe to Netflix, and you now are debating, well, do I watch, you know, The Middle on ABC, or do I go back and watch Wonder Years? And those types of value equations, look, not everyone's going to make the decision to go back and watch the old stuff, but most people have never seen all of the great television that's being made available. To your point, you haven't even been able to distribute a lot of it.
And you couldn't see it because it wasn't available. So,
Right.
you know, maybe it was, you know, maybe you could get a DVD set, but probably not.
I'm
A
not
lot
gonna,
of that stuff sat in the archives for years and years and years and didn't have a home.
like I'd say, Mad Men, the first few seasons was great television, but I think the average viewers during the first few seasons were a few million people a week.
Yeah, they didn't see it.
Nobody saw it. I mean, when you think about the number of people in this country, nobody saw it effectively. And so making great content available at a low price without commercials in a very consumer-friendly, easy-to-find interface, when you finish the next episode, it queues up the next episode, and you don't have to care about which device you're watching on, whether it's your phone or your tablet or your TV. It knows where you left off, and you hit play, and it just plays. Those are great user experiences. And so I think the question really is can television, to answer the question you asked, can television create enough content that has to be watched now?
Saul, it used to be so easy, right? Because you had a couple you had 3, 4 broadcast networks, and they had a pilot season, and you knew who the gatekeepers were, and you knew what you had to do to, you know, show off your pilot and get your, you know, series made. And now, you know, absolutely, there's still gatekeepers, but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And there's so many places. I mean, I think what's so interesting about what Beth is doing, specifically with content that has probably in some cases, very narrow audiences, you know, that your job as a programmer, as a content creator, is to think about, okay, you know, what's the audience for this piece of content that I've created or I want to create? How do I find them? What devices are they on? What's the most likely place that they're going to watch me, find me? How I'm going to market around that. And that's how the decision gets made, rather than the sort of narrow funnel of like, okay, I got to figure out whether ABC, CBS, or NBC is going to take it.
Yeah.
What do you see, Beth? Do you see a shift, you know, more growth in subscription or ads, or both, like Hulu Plus, or what? You know,
I think it's kind of like the Wild West.
Yeah. Okay.
Every partner almost every partner that I work with has a different business model from every other one. So like Amazon, you could get subscription, you can get EST, you can get the DVD, you can buy the T-shirt. Netflix, you can still get the DVD if you want that as well as subscription, and Hulu is running ads. It's all a little different. I'm not sure who the winners and losers are, or if they all win on some level. We have a thriving transactional business.
Yep.
It's grown enormously year on year, and a lot of our partners have continued to grow with us, and we're part of that
want to
growth.
own that Doctor Who? You know?
They do.
Does that surprise you? Like, are you surprised people want to own the content when accessing it is getting easier and easier?
No, because there's a window. There's still a window, so if you want to own it, if you want to watch it, if you missed it on linear broadcast and you don't know about your cable VOD service or you don't like it, you can buy it on iTunes or the other services, and there's a good chunk of time when that's the only way you can get it. So that windowing is still important to us. It's just sometimes it's inverse or reversed, but there's still windows, so we're still trying to reach audiences across them. But we do still see, like right now, Orphan Black, which is a great show running on BBC America.
Great show.
Thank
Great
you. It's really fun. Series 1, through your
People
point
will find great content.
about Mad Men.
Right.
Series 1 wasn't hugely viewed. It sort of was under the radar.
Sure.
At the end of the year, an enormous number of critics listed Orphan Black as being one of their favorites of the year, and a lot of people were probably thinking, what was that? And then we saw enormous growth in our EST platforms. People paid for it to see it at that point. So I think that it's not just old TV that people are doing that with, that's sort of recent TV that you might have missed because you just didn't see the critics, and then now you have an opportunity. So I think all those models can still exist. Longer term, I'm not sure how it plays out. I mean, SVOD is making the most money for us right now, but EST has the highest growth. So
It's just hard to believe when you look at the Nielsen stats and they say that TV viewing is essentially flat year over year based on their sample set. And you look at all of the explosion of all the things that we're talking about, everyone in the audience is probably doing, and all of their friends are doing. and you look at 90 minutes of Netflix streaming a day alone, let alone all the other things that this panel is talking about, it's hard to believe that the Nielsen numbers are even in the ballpark of accurate. Like something doesn't add up. Like
People
somebody's
watch,
lying.
they've got video on all the time.
On every device.
Right. Right. Multiple
Certainly,
people.
the way my teenagers have at least 2 screens on at the same time, and so a piece of that question is, so where does advertising go, right? I mean, TV advertising, $65 billion a year, it was a key driver of, not only the media economy but the rest of the economy. What would Procter and Gamble be if they couldn't run little 30-second soap operas telling you that you needed a Swiffer or Charmin bathroom tissue or all that stuff? Where is that evolving? Betsy, you out selling ads. Now, if I remember the story, you were able to start with some endemic advertisers, but what do you, on the video ad side of your business, what's going on and how valuable do you think advertising on the Blaze is going to be compared to what advertising on a Fox network would have been?
So advertising is very important on the Blaze, and we've advertised in the video network on Blaze TV since inception. I'm a big believer that the 30-second spot is absolutely going away, and it will probably break in a spectacular fashion, and we'll all be around to see it. I think that's coming, relatively soon. And our solution to that, because advertisers are really important and our relationship with advertisers are really important, is kind of what's old is new again. We have started doing with some of our programming on the network much more sponsorship work, and we've started doing live reads in the show. And Rich has actually talked to my boss, Glenn Beck, about what a live read is and how the whole premise of it is for you not to get up and go to the bathroom or get up and go into the kitchen for a snack, because you're watching a program, you actually haven't left the set, and there is a little bit of a countdown clock, so we're going to let you know when the star of the show is going to come back on. But we bring you that advertising, we bring you that messaging, that advertiser messaging on the set within the context of the show. It's clearly messaged, it's different than the content of the show, but we found that people stay and they don't, they're not changing channels. And we've also found we have a lot of direct response advertisers on the Blaze, and those sort of commercials, that messaging does really, really well for them, because they feel like, wow, it's, this is clearly a sponsor or an advertiser that is connected into the content of the show, that they felt comfortable enough having on set, and therefore, must be a good message, and I should pay attention, and maybe I'll end up buying that product.
Let me just ask, to probe on that, the question why the 30-second spot is dead, particularly on digital, where you can make an unskippable ad. You control what people are doing. They don't have DVRs, really. Why do you think that your medium is not conducive to 30-second spots?
So I think people, bless you, Rich. I think people just aren't. Even if I've got to watch a 30-second pre-roll, they're just not right. You're just not watching. You're watching the window on YouTube that says, "Can I skip this in 2, 3, in 3, 2, 1 seconds?" They're just not paying attention to the messaging. And I think what we've seen happen on the web with categories like airlines and hotels and other service industries that they're much better spending their money. JetBlue is much more effective for JetBlue to spend their money running aggregator and network ads and think about, okay, I got to move this number of seats from Phoenix to New York tomorrow, and I'm going to run a bunch of ads on the web to do that, than some kind of 30-second branding spot that is actually not going to convert into any direct business.
And just to that point, I think if everybody pulls out their phone, and if you go to YouTube right now on your mobile phone, the YouTube app, the ad at the top is it's called Wendy's Tuscan Movie Part 1, filmed in Italy. It's a Wendy's ad, so it's a sponsored ad from Wendy's at the top of everyone in the United States' current YouTube mobile feed. It's a 2-minute and 18-second spot. It's not a 30-second spot. Right. It is content. And I think that's the key point, is that it's very hard to tell a real story. There are some really good 30-second spots, but they're few and far between. It's very hard to tell a real story in 30 seconds. And when you look at what ads work on YouTube, and they put up a dashboard every single month of the most popular, most viral, most shared, most watched ads. They're almost, never the 30-second ones. They're always the ones that are longer, that really are engaging. They're like watching content, because we all like watching good content. And so when you make good content, whether it's an ad or whether it's actual television, people like watching good content. And I think that's going to be the challenge. It's not so much that video advertising isn't dying. Limiting it to a 30-second traditional format that is generally untargeted, where it's pretty crazy that if we all have these digital set tops with, we all have these amazing phones and these amazing tablets, and yet we all go home, we turn on Modern Family for one of the first half of the big finale tonight, and we all get the exact same ads at the exact same moments in time, no matter what we're interested in. It's like the one thing that hasn't evolved at all. And so
From the same 150
advertisers. Absolutely. Yeah, so the whole thing is broken, and the question is, when do we get to the point where, hey, before Modern Family starts, you'll have uninterrupted, but we're going to send you a targeted, 4-minute ad that we think you're going to love and is content. So much like what you see when you go to the movie theaters and you see extended, it's obviously not personalized, but extended content segments.
Yep.
That concept is going to hit the living room. It's not 10 years away. Whether it's 2 years away from being more visible, I don't know, but it's certainly not 10 years away.
If you had some great idea about, I'm going to start a TV programming service around soap operas or travel or whatever it is that you think people will watch, 10 years ago, you could sort of think, okay, cable might eventually pay me X per sub and advertising works in this format. We now sort of have the, at least the beginnings of an understanding of what the economics would be to sell programming into Netflix or those various things. What would you be thinking about advertising? What would you, if you were trying to build, a new video service? Is there, given that the traditional formats have ground to a halt, how can you build an advertiser-supported service? Is there a model that you could count on to, risk your money on to pay for this great programming you know how to make?
Well, I think if the content is really worth watching, people will show up and pay for it in some form. Obviously, it takes a lot of risk capital. Glenn had to dig into his own personal net worth to fund it. Most people aren't willing to do that. I think if, time will tell whether more and more people are. I think the reality is they're going to be forced to look at those models, because I think, to the point we were talking about before, if time is fixed and time keeps fragmenting, at some point the idea, and we're all using DVRs, and there's cloud-based DVRs, and you can watch all of the content you have stored in your own personal cloud DVR, not to mention what you have on Netflix and all these things. It's going to be hard to imagine that $65 billion of advertising is healthy. And so, I think people are going to be forced to really take a much harder look, and maybe it's Burnett, maybe it's somebody else. Someone's going to start doing this in a more serious way, because they're going to see where the line is going. And I think all the upfronts that I've been to this week, they're all talking about how, kind of don't worry, things are still fine. We're still so much bigger audience-wise. We're still the best place to get audience. And, I think the advertisers aren't dumb. I think the advertisers are very interested in exploring new ways of reaching consumers, whether it's what Beth's doing, whether it's what Betsy's doing. There's lots of new ways, and the advertiser's not going to just kind of they're not going to close the door and wait till the very end. They're going to be looking very opportunistically at ways to invest in new business ideas, and I think you see that. Look at the brands that support Michelle Phan on YouTube. You think about the real makeup brands that really support her and pay her millions of dollars to sponsor that content. And those are early examples, but I think you're going to see a lot more of those types. And I was just on the way over here, I was reading, Twitch TV has more viewership, according to Stan Vine, than HBO Go. So, from a digital platform, Twitch TV, which, people in this room may know, but I don't think most people realize, it's just people watching people watching other people play video games. It's a massive amount of time that people are spending on this platform. There's just, advertisers are going to want to reach those consumers, because those are consumers that are clearly not turning on the TV and watching CBS tonight.
So I think what there's a there's a connection that will be made that hasn't been made yet. And if you look at the big brand advertisers, whether it's Procter & Gamble or Coca-Cola or name your big brand advertiser, and all the research that they've done on their own, sometimes with their agencies, but a lot on their own, and the advisory councils that they've created, they know in every audience category how many influencers there are, where they are, what they need to do to move the needle on a new twist on Mountain Dew or on a certain product. So they've been quietly sort of amassing that over the years. So, for example, Coca-Cola knows that, there's 25,000, 50,000 influential Latinas in this country. And if you can reach those people, you've basically reached the entire female Hispanic population sort of through those people. Now, what the disconnect is I don't think then those brands have totally effectively gone out to the web and out to where those people are sort of hanging out on the web where they can be identified and made that match, right? So Coca-Cola is still spending, a lot of money in broadcast TV, not knowing who it's reaching when it shows its programming in prime time tonight. So once those connections are made and there's a result from that where, okay, I know my 25,000 or my 50,000, I did whatever I had to do on the web to connect to programming where those 25, 50,000 are. They went and took an action because of it that I can measure. Then I think it's just game over. And I think broadcast TV just looks like the sort of dinosaurs that they are.
Beth, you don't directly sell ads, but you have colleagues at the BBC as well as many of your partners do. What do you see happening to the advertising-driven network business model? Is it as dire as Betsy is
I haven't thought of it as being quite as dire as Betsy's suggesting. I think we're still, BBC America, which is our cable and satellite network here, is still running ads and has this very successful ad sales business. And we've been very creative about the way that we're working with our advertisers to reach the audience. For instance, doing work with Twitter so that there's live content going out to our fans at the same time that the program is airing, and that is sponsored content, so that there's both an advertising message and an additional editorial message. And so, I mean, from our perspective, we're still relying on that model for that part of the business, and I'm trying to be creative about the way that we reach the audience in different ways. To your point about reaching the direct, the specific audience you're going for, if we know that there's big fans of Doctor Who or Top Gear, we know what the demographic for that is. If we can organize a sponsor, an advertiser to work with us on tweeting special content during a live broadcast, that both keeps people interested in the live broadcast, which was your point before, and is reaching a very specific demographic. So I think we still have hope in that model, but I can't speak for it longer term.
You also have to think about what Charlie Ergen is trying to do with Disney. The deal that was recently struck, which hasn't launched yet, but I do think that it will be a watershed event for multi-channel television, because this whole idea of a personal subscription service and shifting from a household model, when we all grow up in a model where it's $70, you end up with hundreds of channels, and for an extra $5 you can add an outlet here in your house and add an outlet here and get this box or that box. But if you blow apart that model and go, well, it's ridiculous that kid comes out of college, he's 21 years old, he doesn't want to sign up for $70 of cable, doesn't have 5 outlets, he's got no television, he's got one television or no television. He doesn't want all of this. He just wants access to some of the key channels, from ESPN to HBO to the broadcast channels, etc. So what Charlie's envisioned with Disney, and hopefully we'll get other players on board so we can launch this later this year, is this idea of moving from a household-based process to a per stream. So you sign up for a personal subscription to multi-channel video, and you get one stream of ESPN at a time. As soon as you want ESPN and CBS streaming, you have to sign up for a second stream, a whole second package, essentially. And so it's really targeted at a generation that isn't interested in buying a household bundle of content. Will there be some people that drop down from the paying for the full Comcast bundle to something like that? Yeah, I'm sure there's a few, but I think people are going to leave. The number of people that subscribe to multi-channel television today is 100 million households. We should all take our bet on where that number is in 5 years. But it's not 100 million. It's going to be a lower number. And so the question is there innovation in bundling that can reduce how far that number falls, because it certainly isn't going to grow.
So at this point, we've got some time left. Open it up for questioning. Anybody, any of these things catch people's attention? Questions? Anybody? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, in your strategy, I haven't heard a lot about the actual monetization of how you're placing your ads, where you're placing your ads. You're finding that online, for VOD or SVOD, is pre-roll successful? Do you find, any kind of recommendation or ads upon pause and things like that you're working with?
Betsy, you mentioned that you're having a lot of success with Glenn just doing the endemic advertising. Are there any other formats that you're playing with or you're having any success with, or is it all, the sponsorship integration that you've been talking about?
Well, the way I'd answer that question is we have, for the majority of our advertisers, they buy, they're coming in to buy an audience, right? And my audience is similar in sort of demographic mix, but a little bit different in size depending on what platform you're on, web versus video stream versus, right, email, whatever. And what we found is these advertisers come on and they sit with the salesperson and there's a custom package that's delivered. Okay, I think given the messaging that you're trying to create, we want to give you a little bit of video pre-roll, we want to give you a little bit of dedicated email, we want to give you a little bit of live read on the television network in this show, not that show. And that mix is created specifically for that advertiser in a lot of cases to help move product, specifically move product, so they see a result at the end of their campaign. And for every advertiser, it's different. It's a different mix. And look, that's a high-touch relationship. And as a result, that's an expensive, it's a high CPM. But if we do it, if the sales executive does it the right way and the client is very clear about their objectives and what they want to get out of the campaign, you're going to get a win-win. You're going to get a client that comes back and says, "Wow, fantastic! That $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 that I spent with you, I really saw a return on those marketing dollars. Next time, I want double. Next time, I want triple." And one of the things that's been amazing in the 3 years that I've been with Glenn, with some of the sponsors that we've had, kind of across all the different platforms, is we've had folks come in and their first buy and their first ad buy was $1,000. When I was at CBS, you couldn't even get lunch with somebody if you, right? I mean, you're in the seven figures to sort of open the door, and that's why there's only 150, 200 broadcast network advertisers. So the first buy was $1,000, and we took that $1,000 and really put it to work and put it to good use. We have one particular client that 18 months later, their buy was $1 million. I mean, it's crazy. Well, how did that happen? And part of that is, we really showed the ability to achieve their marketing goals, and they were willing every time they came back to spend more money because they were achieving those marketing goals at a higher and higher level.
But you also know exactly who's watching, right? I mean, you know your audience specifically. They've signed up directly for your product. You have unique insight that. TV can guess at the demographics of who's watching, but you really know.
But I also think, Rich, TV is lazy. I think that, I think, yes, it's, when it's sort of a blanket mass, it's sort of harder to say who are all those nameless and faceless people that watch the evening news at night. But, all of these networks have data on social media, they have email lists, they have, people that come to their websites. They've got profiles of who their rabid fans are, all their fan clubs, but I think they're lazy, and I don't think, again, the research side, sort of the research and the marketing side of the broadcast networks and the salespeople kind of work together to say, okay, the most likely, the average Modern Family user is this person, and look, we've got lots of these people. Does your marketing message want to reach these people? I think broadcast just says, hey, we got everybody, we're in 100 million homes, and we had this great number in 2554 last night.
Yeah, go ahead.
This question is for Betsy and Beth.
I was wondering if you could comment on the relationship between social and tune-in. Some big broadcasters are saying social does not drive tune-in. Is that true? Are you tracking that? Is that an important measurement? People post on Facebook? Are they watching the programs? What's the relationship and are you tracking it?
Social definitely drives tune-in. I mean, not every day. Like, you can't say every day, like, hey, tune into the Glenn Beck show, it's 4:45, and then people are like, oh my God, I have to turn on my Roku. But we've seen in particular with the once-a-week documentaries that we do on the network for the record, that the social pushes that we do, and probably Facebook has been more effective as a medium for us than Twitter has, though we use both pretty extensively, that to be able to, to message leading up to that, leading up to the debut of that doc show, which you can then get on demand, forever afterwards. But the messaging leading up to the premiere of that episode has absolutely driven tune-in, for sure. And we target, we look at okay, when did the social team put those Facebook posts up or those Twitter posts up, and how many did they do, and what's the length of time before the episode, and and then you watch it, because we've got all, as Rich said, we got all of this data. You watch the people kind of come in and watch, and they also, people also come in and chat on a lot of our programs too. Do live chat.
Beth, where does social fit into your distribution?
It's huge for us. I would agree. It's definitely driving the audience to the programming, especially on a smaller cable net, which isn't always.
Orphan Black.
Orphan Black is a perfect
Wouldn't
example.
even know about it without social media, right?
There's a group called the Clone Club, who are fans of Orphan Black, who've sort of self-identified, and so that's sort of an organically formed group that's grown up through the fans, and they're active on Tumblr and Twitter and Facebook, and we address them. And what we're trying to do now is to keep shows like that alive between seasons. I mean, there are 10 episodes, right? Then there's a long time before there's a second season. So we're trying to keep the fans engaged in those shows. Doctor Who is another good example of that. Top Gear, all the time, whether or not there's something actively broadcasting, and it's been enormously helpful. And we do track it.
Go ahead.
If you guys comment a little bit, I'm Richard Tao from Media Audits International. My question is if you guys would comment a little bit about the content valuation processes that you go through in order to do an SVOD deal. If there's any valuation processes going on, other than can we build some kind of a market price? Is there any bottoms-up analysis that you guys can do?
That's a Beth question.
Yeah, we're working pretty hard on that, and we're trying to figure out what are the best algorithms, what's the best mathematical formula to figure out the value of a show. I mean, we look at if we have streaming data from previous shows on those services, we look at that. We look at the ratings, we look at the demographics that we've gotten. We look at, and then there's just a market demand question. Sometimes we have competing services, so then it can become a question of the demand for that program. So there are a lot of different metrics. There's not one thing that we look at, though. Lots.
Question in the back.
Yeah, this is for Rich. On Netflix's last earnings call, you spoke to Tetsuanos about the recent price increase. You said you kind of intimated that because content costs are going up. Do you think that Netflix has a lot of wiggle room in raising your price increases? We're starting at $9 a month now. Do you think they can go to 15 and really compete with HBO on that front, or do you think it's a little bit lower?
No, I always think it comes down to the content. I think great content people will find, people will pay for. I don't think there's any doubt that HBO has higher profile, higher quality content than Netflix today. HBO is rolling out, there's a new something on HBO every single month. You'll see something big and new and expensive. And but when you look at Netflix, they're shooting to be that. It's going to take several years, and they're moving. I think the famous quote that I think they've used is, we want to be HBO faster than HBO got to be HBO. And look, they're certainly making good progress on that in terms of the quality of the content and how fast it's happened. I mean, I remember the first original programming on HBO was Dream On. And you think about how far we've come from Dream On to Game of Thrones and Sopranos and everything in between. So I think they're making progress. Remember, you pay $15 a month. That money doesn't all go to HBO, but you're spending $15 a month to get HBO. But remember, HBO only keeps 10 of it. So the reality is, can it be a very large business even at $10 a month? Absolutely. I mean, if you believe Netflix's view that they can get to 50, 60 million U.S. subscribers and keep margins at, call it 30+%, they're going to have the ability to spend, call it in the range of $4 to $5 billion.
How much does
On
HBO
programming.
spend on programming every year?
Call it a couple billion.
And
So I mean,
right now, Netflix is spending how much?
a couple billion. I
So
mean,
they're already spending the same amount on programming.
but a lot of it is catalog content.
Right, so the
and,
mix-
And I think that the challenge is a lot of that I would argue they overspent on because they needed to get scale and mass.
Right.
And to be in the game. And now the question is how do they reallocate? Like Discovery is seeing declines of their SVOD deals because it's good content. Is anyone watching Netflix to go to see last year's Say Yes to the Dress? No, they're not. I mean, even Deadliest Catch, it may do okay, but it's not. These are just not driving big SVOD viewership. And I think whoever asked the question on, does the BBC know what the content's worth? I think the other side, they actually really know what it's worth because they know exactly how much content's being watched. And so whether it's Amazon or Netflix, they know whether it drives the needle on viewership. And I think they're making value judgments of, do we spend on originals? Do we invest in buying this last year's series or not?
All right. We've hit the time that's been allotted for us. So I want to thank the panelists, thank the audience for great questions.
Thank you, Saul.